Yes, welcome in. Big time, big game this Saturday in Wisconsin and Oregon at Camp Randall Stadium, the number one team in town for the first time since 2010. What a special night that was for David Gilreath and John Clay and everybody else. J.J. Watt, not so special for Luke Fickell that night, though. Was not as special as for him. I would say he probably does not have the same fun memories of 2010 that Wisconsin fans do, but he's got an opportunity to make some of his own memories this Saturday, Jesse.
It's such a weird situation, and I think I mentioned this earlier in the week, that this would be the thing people have been talking about for weeks and weeks if the Badgers hadn't already played two top five teams. And this will be the third top five opponent at home, which has never happened in the history of the program. But just because every meaningful game hasn't gone Wisconsin's way to date doesn't mean it can't Saturday night. And if it does, it will be remembered very fondly. And 15, 14 years from now, people would, I imagine, still be talking about it just like they do the Ohio State game, because very rarely do you have a chance to play the number one team, and even less frequently do you get a chance to beat them.
Yep, we're going to get into. I think some people would cut you off there and say they don't have a chance to beat them, but that's irrelevant. We're going to get into exactly what Wisconsin maybe needs to do to find a way to keep the game close and maybe pull it out at the end. Again, I think the way that the Penn State game played out had an impact on how the following week played out, but no one cares about that. They've had week off, had to stew with that 42-10. We'll see what kind of energy that they bring out. We'll kind of see what the energy that the crowd brings out. It's a 6:30 game, which means you got all day to get ready for it. And I'm sure fans will. I suspect there's going to be quite a few Oregon fans in the stadium as well, just because it's their first trip here since, 2000 that they came here with Joey Harrington. And yeah, it was a shoebox. And that's where Wisconsin played most of their good players played that game. They were allowed to stagger the suspensions over the first, I think, 3 or 4 games. And like Jamar Fletcher played in that game. I think he had 3 interceptions in that game. And then Michael Bennett had like 290 yards rushing. It was a fun game, back and forth. The following year, they went out to Eugene. It did not go as well for them, but they gave him a game. I'll say that. Anthony Davis's debut gave him a game, but all that's irrelevant for Saturday night. We're going to get into that game. We're also going to talk about, it is a big game. It's a big opportunity. I know we are a football podcast, but there's also a big game Friday night with the basketball team. Kind of interested because I don't want to give him too much credit. Like I hate doing this. I don't like doing it. But Grant Bills from the Wisco Sports Show threw it out there that he'd rather see the basketball team win on Friday night. It would be a bigger win for them than it would be if the Wisconsin football team beat the number one team in the country on Saturday night. So we'll get into that. Get your thoughts on that, Jesse, as well. And then we'll make our picks. Not to be not to give it away here, but might be right here. Is that? I believe that's where we're at right now. There's no separation. So,
are you saying between the Friday game and the Saturday game?
No. I'm saying we're going to get into our picks. All I'm saying is there's no separation between in that category right now. So
I've left the door open for you, and you've walked right through.
I did. Sometimes, it has to be a big door for me to walk through, but I did walk through it. So we'll get into that as well. Before we do, Home Field Apparel, the official apparel sponsor here of the camp and the swing for that matter. If you missed the swing, we posted a show yesterday with Josh Gosser talking about the Final Four teams from 2014 and 15, and they're going to be honored tomorrow night in advance of that Arizona game. So go check it out. But the official apparel sponsor of both podcasts, and they have the best vintage gear anywhere around. You can find more information up on homefieldapparel.com and use promo code Bucky24 for 15% off your first purchase. All right, let's jump into this. What does success look like against the number one team in the country, the Oregon Ducks, coming in here on Saturday night?
This is going to sound like a daunting proposition because it absolutely is, but everybody on the team, individually and collectively, has to play the best game they ever have as a member of Wisconsin Badgers, and maybe even whatever team they were in before, for the Badgers to win this game. So, and I don't even think that's a stretch, just because despite the fact they've already played two top 5 teams, I felt this way coming in this season. This is the best team Wisconsin is going to play during the regular season. Now, there are some critical questions here about who's going to be available for Oregon. Jordan James, the number one running back, Tez Johnson, number one wide receiver, Jordan Birch, your defensive end. But they still have Dylan Gabriel, and I suppose it'd be a surprise to me if all three of those top guys were out. But so that's the starting point, is do everything that you haven't been able to do extremely well. But we can go from there. What's your number one key here, though?
I mean, look, you go and look at the numbers with Oregon. They are fantastic on both sides of the ball. I mean, really, really good, I should say, on both sides of the ball. The offense is really good. It's number one offense, obviously, in the Big Ten. But then you think about the defense. No team not named Ohio State, no Big Ten team, I should say, not named Ohio State, has put up more than 300 yards of offense on them. And that was Purdue with 301, and they lost that. They got shut out in that game, I'm pretty sure. Or maybe it was whatever it was. Much of that came on the ground. I think the key here is obviously to be able to run the ball.
Yeah.
You have to be able to run the ball this game. You have to keep the ball as much as you can away from Oregon's offense and the big play offense that they do have. And if you want it to nitpick in terms of where things are for Oregon when it comes to where they are susceptible, you could potentially say rushing defense. They are ranked, I believe it was 32nd in the country, which is their lowest of, I should say their rushing offense isn't too high either. But in terms of Wisconsin's offense being able to move the ball, running the ball I think is going to be a huge key. They're ranked 32nd in the country and 10th in the Big Ten. They're giving up 117 yards a game, but it's not like they're giving up a ton of yards like per carry type of stuff. So it's, I think a lot of teams probably had the same idea of let's try and keep the ball away from Oregon's offense and try and run it. But they even their run defense, when you go back and you just look at what they've done to this point outside of, Ashton Jeanty at Boise State, putting up some big numbers in that first game or the second game of the season, and then Purdue running for 208 yards. They've held almost every other offense outside of Ohio State to some pretty low totals. So, but I think it has to be Wisconsin's running game. You cannot, as we saw last week, 2 weeks ago against Iowa, you can't make Braden Locke be the guy that's going to beat him. You have to be able to be balanced. You have to be able to keep the chains moving, not get into second and long. So when I went back and listened to Luke Fickell and then also listened to Phil Longo again, Phil was talking about, not having success on first down kind of puts you in second and they know what's coming territory. And so he's trying to limit those. But then you heard Fickell say, even if we're going to be in second and long, we still need to take some of those shots on first down. And I agree. It's a balance, though. Against Iowa, there was zero balance. They just came out throwing the ball over the place. And I know there were so many people against Penn State. It's like, why are you always running on first down? People are, and I'm the same way. Like, if it doesn't work running the ball, I'm going to throw the ball on first down. If it doesn't, work passing the ball, I'm like, why aren't you running the ball on first down? But I am more open to the idea of throwing on first down than I am just to continually try and ram your head against a brick wall, which has largely been the case against quality competition when you're trying to run it.
They're in a difficult spot too, because the last thing you want to do, like you said, Zach, is put it on Braden in a second or third and long situation where the defense can kind of tee off. But they have to keep the ball away from Oregon. This is, I think, maybe the greatest fear that I would have if I were a fan is some of these situations where you end up with a quick 3 and out on a possession that takes 57 seconds or something like that. You cannot have that in this matchup. Why did Wisconsin have so much success against poor teams earlier? Well, they dominated the line of scrimmage. They were able to move the chains. And then if they have an effective run game, that can help set up the pass. Because I don't see how this defense can consistently stay on the field with Oregon. Now, we saw against Penn State, I thought they played pretty well for the most part. In the fourth quarter, things just fell apart, but they were a big reason why Wisconsin was still in that game in the fourth quarter.
Third quarter. is when things fell apart. I know you're not talking about everything. That's where I'm going.
Against Penn State?
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying defensively, though. I mean, Wisconsin.
Yeah, no. As soon as he threw that pick six, it was over.
Yeah.
Defensively too. I'm saying, like, as soon as Penn State went up, the defense kind of folded.
Okay. Well,
I'm not saying you're wrong about how it played out in the fourth quarter. I'm just saying that game turned obviously in the third quarter, and it had nothing to do with the defense.
Yes. Well, that's what I'm saying. The defense, I felt like, gave them a chance deep into the game.
Absolutely.
But this is really challenging because I think you look at the numbers, and Wisconsin has a top 10 pass defense, and that is largely because they have played bad passing offenses. But then I go and look at what they did against good quarterbacks, or at least quarterbacks that at the time were playing well, and it's not been good. Jalen Milroe threw 3 touchdown passes. Miller Moss, who got benched, threw 3 touchdown passes and more than 300 yards. And Drew Aller, before he got hurt, was playing pretty well. I think those 3 quarterbacks combined to complete 70% of their passes. And so I feel like that's sort of a fool's gold type of thing where you're looking at those numbers. And this is the biggest challenge that they're going to face, because Dillon Gabriel is a legit Heisman finalist candidate, and he's having a fantastic season, and he can also beat you with his legs. So everything comes back to a cliche of complementary football, but you're right. It starts with Wisconsin being able to establish the run game offensively. And I was talking to Joe Brunner earlier this week. He talked about kind of all the staples that they need to do: be fast, play physical, play free, all those types of things. But it's like, you didn't do that against Iowa, and it's hard to feel like you can have confidence. And I'm not saying the players don't, but everywhere else, that you can do it against a team like Oregon.
Yeah, it's just the other thing is Oregon can get after the quarterback. They average about 3 sacks a game, which is in the top 5 in the Big Ten and top 30 in the country. So if you do put them in situations where they're just able to tee off, you're in trouble, right? Like that's not what you want. They have the athletes that are, however you want to think that Wisconsin's played, they've actually done a solid job in pass protection for the most part this year. I think if you're looking at anything offensively, that maybe has been as consistent as anything. But against these guys, against these type of athletes, you're asking a lot of your offensive line to be in consistent second and third and long situations to be able to hold up against them. So run the ball, have the ability to run the ball. Yes, when Wisconsin's on defense, have they figured it out? I guess it's an advantage that maybe Oregon isn't going to try and run the ball down your throat based on what we saw the last time. But maybe they see that and be like, hey, yeah, we have Dillon Gabriel. That's fine. But you guys can't stop the run, so we're just going to run it right down your throat. And this is where I think it comes into play, because you go back to the Iowa game, and there were so many people that were upset, and I have no problem with them being upset about it, but you knew Iowa wasn't throwing the ball, right? You knew they weren't going to try and come out and throw the ball a ton. They were going to try and run the ball down your throat, and they put in some personnel packages that had Wisconsin and 2 defensive linemen. And truly, it was a 4-man front because you had the 2 outside linebackers there as well. But they ran – I went back and looked at the numbers, and you take away some of the goal line stuff and some of the quarterback scrambles, and they ran 21 times for 200 yards against when he had 2 defensive linemen on the field. When he had a 3-man front, they ran for 121 yards on 24 carries. But that's almost double, right? Like in terms of like yards per carry, they averaged nearly 9.5 yards per carry when there are 2 defensive linemen on the field. When it was 3, it was 5. So it's not like it was great when it was 3, but they have to figure something out there, because I do think Oregon will at least try and run the ball. And if you're going to spread them out and allow some seams, some openings, it's going to be a tough day, because if they're able to run the ball, then you're absolutely screwed.
Going back to that Iowa game, I think they felt like, or had seen, that Iowa would be in 11 personnel and have 3 receivers out there. And I think they didn't want to be caught in a spot where they didn't have the advantage. But we go back and look at the numbers. Iowa ran the ball, I think, 54 times and passed it 10 times. And so it's a tough spot to be in when you're trying to have a defense that's reacting to what the team is doing, except that you knew what Iowa was going to do and how many plays were there going to be out there where you were at Iowa had an advantage in the passing game and they were actually going to take advantage of it. But I mean, that's sort of irrelevant to Oregon because Oregon is a completely different offense without, a quarterback who's going to throw it just 10 times. But yeah, I mean, this defense has to play great. And I think also just, it's interesting what these guys were saying this week about the mentality that they have in approaching this game. Because Hunter Wohler even said it, like, sometimes you hear the post-game press conference or whatever, guy on the court after a basketball game or football game, and they're like, nobody believed in us. And you're like, what are you talking about? Except in this instance, it's true because Hunter Wohler said, nobody thinks we're going to win this game. So what do we have to lose? We're going to go out and just play the game. And I got that sense from talking to multiple players. It's just, I think, unfortunate that the Badgers as a program are in that position where they're playing a big game. Nobody believes they're going to win because for a long time, that was not how people felt.
Yeah, I mean, even if they had put together a solid effort against Iowa, maybe you would feel a little bit okay. Just going back to the Iowa thing, I'm saying that, yes, they had 11 personnel on the field. I get that. But they were not throwing the ball.
Right.
We know they weren't. Like, I understand that you don't want to get caught in it, but I'd much rather them throw the ball all over the place than run it down your throat. And it didn't feel like there were, again, I'm not going to pretend to be a defensive guru and be able to break down absolutely everything they tried to do to stop the run. But from this point of view, not great. And I asked Luke Fickell about it, some of the struggles that they had. And he mentioned guys out of place and that type of stuff. But when you ask your defensive linemen to be chaos makers and you kind of give them some freedom, well, yeah, guys are going to be out of place. And we saw a number of times Wisconsin defensive lineman in the backfield and the guy just running right to where the gap that he vacated. You know what I mean? So like that is, I think, I don't want to say it's a shot, but I think it's certainly something you have to look at if you're Mike Tressel and Luke Fickell and try and figure that out, because Wisconsin's run defense that was so good for so long because of how responsible and gap sound that they were, and then you kind of let the linebackers flow and do what it is, that has fallen away, and it just doesn't even exist anymore right now. And I don't know that it's necessarily the lack of talent there. I think it's what maybe they're asking those guys to do. So
quite possible. It's funny, before you said Oregon's worst mark was that they were 32nd in run defense, and I'm sitting here thinking, God, Wisconsin would kill to be 32nd in run defense, because after the Iowa game, I think they were 92nd.
Yeah, the fall off there has just been insane. Like 2021, the best run defense in the modern era, right? So 22 wasn't horrible. Last year wasn't catastrophic. But compared to this year, all of these past 3 years or past 2 years are off the charts good. So, how do you deal with that? And then also, when it comes to special teams, Wisconsin's punting game has been a weapon. Can it be a weapon in forcing Oregon to go the distance? Now, when I say that, I'm flashing back to Oregon's game against Purdue, who, had this great punt down inside the 5, and like 3 minutes later, Oregon had a touchdown. So but you have to at least make them try. And then again, it's going back to the turnovers. Braden Locke cannot turn the ball over on Saturday if they're going to win, because Wisconsin, I don't feel is going to. Maybe I'll be totally wrong, and the Wisconsin defense come out flying around and make some plays on Dylan Gabriel, but the dude has played more football than almost any college quarterback in history. He's the all-time leading passer, I believe, or right up there in terms of yards. He has seen it all. So I feel like you're not going to fool him on Saturday night. It would take some big-time plays and some big-time moments from Wisconsin's defense to fluster him. So that's going to be tough. That means Braden Locke has to be, I don't want to say perfect, but he has to be very, very good for them to have a chance. And if I'm being completely honest, Jesse, not to be negative here, I don't think he has it in him.
Here's part of the problem, too, is I think Oregon's going to put up a lot of points. And what level of faith does anybody have that Wisconsin's going to be able to do that? I know that when you're taking averages, it's over the course of a season. And so we did see them score 52 against a bad Purdue team and come back and play well against Rutgers, but they haven't done that against good teams. I think in the 4 losses, they're averaging 13.5 points per game. And they're averaging 25.1 points per game for the season, which is it's just average. And Phil Longo, again, didn't come here to be average. But
That's
I don't
average.
see that. 25 nationally. I think that's about what the average is or has been.
You said 21.
25.1.
Oh, okay.
I misspoke. So it's just hard for me to see that this offense, with the way Braden Locke has been playing, especially in big moments, is going to be able to even get to 25 against Oregon.
All right. So one player that is going to be the key to making it happen.
Well, I'll go Tawee Walker, though it obviously falls on a number of other guys, because when they were really rolling, he was playing very well. I think the last couple of games, at least statistically, it hasn't been great. I think he has that in him to have a big game, and he's certainly going to get plenty of opportunities. I'll be shocked if he doesn't carry the ball 20 times, unless it is so ineffective that they abandon the run game, which is a possibility as well.
Wisconsin is 103rd in turnover margin right now in the country.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when your quarterback has 9 turnovers in his starts.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. So, it's easy to say.
I'm fully aware.
Right. It's easy to see, the defense needs to force more takeaways. And it's like, okay, well, yes, that may be true. And also your offense is just giving it away.
Quarterback's giving it away.
Yes.
Again, not all of them have been his fault. Tretch Kahuna had the drop against USC. Will Pauling had the drop against Purdue. The last couple weeks, though, I don't know who you blame other than Braden Locke. So we'll see what happens on Saturday with him. I mentioned the comment from Grant Bills. You're on his show on a weekly basis. 4 to 6 on the Zone in Madison, and also a number of other places in the state. Just Google it. You can find it. He's also on YouTube. I don't know why I'm giving him a shout out. He gives us shout outs. So I'll give him a shout out here. But so go find him. Great show. Award-winning show, actually. But his show last night, he was talking about this game, and he said that a Wisconsin win over number 9 Arizona on Friday night would mean more than a win over number 1 Oregon on Saturday. And he gave a number of reasons for it. And while I'd like to say they're all ridiculous, I kind of understand where he's coming from, right? Wisconsin's 3-0 in basketball. They have an entire season to play. Beating Arizona would be a huge message to the entire country that this Wisconsin team is going to be something to reckon with. And how great would that look on a resume come March? Essentially, that's what he's saying. Football, he said, it doesn't have it. They don't deserve to beat the number 1 team because of what they've been this season. You could talk about it being a program-defining win. They don't deserve to have a program-defining win. This is what he said. They don't deserve it. What would it actually mean? Would it take away what happened against Iowa? No. Either way. So that was how the conversation laid out. I figured you might have a take on it, and so I wanted to throw it at you. What do you think? Would it be a more important win for Greg Gard and the Badgers on Friday night to beat a number 9 Arizona team? Or would it be a more important win for Luke Fickell and company to beat the number 1 team in the country for just the 5th time in school history, beating the number 1 team and winning that game to get to bowl eligibility?
I appreciate Grant's willingness to go out here on a limb with a hot take. And
that's what he does.
It's one that gives you pause and makes you really contemplate it, because there's no doubt it's a big weekend for both programs, but the answer is absolutely football. It's so much more important. It's not even close. And I say that for, I suppose, several reasons, but if Wisconsin loses in basketball, they have 30 games in the regular season. Basketball and football are just so different. You are not defined by what happens in a single game in basketball in the way that you are in football. And I completely understand that it may not end up being a program defining win for football if they beat Oregon. On the other hand, this is such an unbelievable opportunity where you haven't even played a number one team in 14 years. It's primetime NBC for a third straight game. People can roll their eyes about that, but if you win, much like against Penn State, it is the game that everyone's going to be talking about, and Wisconsin will be on the map in a way that they haven't for a program that has struggled to find its footing for so long, hasn't beaten a ranked team in 3 years. So, yeah, I think if they win, it's not automatically going to mean that this program is back and that next year they're going to go 9-3 and be on the door of the college football playoff. But they've been desperately fighting for a moment like this. And with basketball, I mean, they could be in a great position and be in the top 10 in January, which we've seen the last 2 years, and it still doesn't matter. And they're going to have so many more chances here. They got Marquette, obviously, which is a ranked team. They got the Greenbrier Classic. They're playing Butler and Indy. There are a number of other big games for them. So I also think Greg Gard has established himself clearly, at least at Wisconsin, in a way that Luke hasn't since he came to Madison. And so you have more to fall back on if you just lose a single game. So like it's apples and oranges the way that I look at it, because there's only 12 regular season games for the football program. And football, frankly, is just every game is a way bigger deal. And number one, in the modern era, they've beaten them twice. So like it's just a way bigger deal for football.
What gets more run? A win over number 1 Oregon or a win over number 9 Arizona? What gets more run nationally? What gets more run locally?
Yeah.
This feels like you just ask that question. Just throw that question out there and be like, what gets you more exposure? What gets you more on the minds of people around the country? A Friday night, 8:00 game against a number 9 Arizona team that, is a very good team. I get that. But ain't nobody watching that on Friday night. Like I'm not, I'm going to be watching it, obviously. But Mike Tyson fights tomorrow night too. Like we're not going to be watching that. I know people have multiple screens, but like we're not doing that. You haven't been following this, have you?
Is it
Jake Paul?
Paul? Yeah,
I think it's Jake Paul.
30 years ago, this would have been intriguing.
Dude's 58.
Yeah.
Tyson is, I think, 58. And fighting in this, either way, it's irrelevant. But Saturdays, for football, Friday night is going to be about Mike Tyson. No, but I just don't think, because as you laid out, there are just so many more opportunities for the basketball team to make their presence felt. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to determine whether, a win's not going to put them in the tournament, right? Like it'll help them come tournament time, assuming they're in a spot to be there. But it's November. It's November basketball. It's people do not remember what happened in November. God, I really wish it was like September or something, because that would have been an amazing rhyme. But like in March, they don't remember. It doesn't really matter for the most part.
Yeah. Put it this way. In 5 years, what would people be talking about more, Badgers fans? The fact that Wisconsin's basketball team beat a number 9 Arizona team in November, or the fact that the football team beat the number 1 team in the country in prime time for the first number 1 win in 14 years? There's just way more power behind what a football win could mean. And to me, that's kind of the end of it. And
Luke Fickell desperately needs it more.
100%.
Like it's not even close in terms of which program needs the win. It's just not. I know that there are people that believe, because of what happened at the end of last year with the basketball program and they made their run in the Big Ten tournament, but the way that things ended in Brooklyn and the way that the season where they got up to in the top 10 of the country and then fell off, that Greg Gard needs a big year and Greg Gard needs to have these type of wins. And maybe that's true, but like barring an absolute disaster of a season, he's not going anywhere. And Luke Fickell isn't either. But you need something for the fans to grasp onto if you're if you're Luke Fickell and this program. It can't just be about what you do on the recruiting trail. It has to be something that happens on the field. And right now, they don't have a lot to grasp onto on the field. There's no great wins you talked about it. We've talked about it a ton. Like, try to figure out their best win. Minnesota, like that you need something. And just to have it happen against a number 1 Oregon team, it's not going to hurt them at all. They're still going to win They're still going to be in the Big Ten, most likely, I should say, most likely be in the Big Ten championship game. Though there is a weird tiebreaker where I think if Oregon, Indiana, and Ohio State all tie, it would be Indiana and Ohio State going to the championship game. I don't know. These tiebreakers are about to be insane, like in all these leagues because of no divisions. It's going to be absolutely insane, but irrelevant. I just don't think it's really, really close. I just don't. And I also think it's a little bit of not pandering, but he's got a shtick. Grant's got a shtick. And it's about being like this basketball insider, this Wisconsin basketball insider, the only one that talks Wisconsin basketball. And he does do that. He does definitely talk Wisconsin basketball. So give him props for that. But yeah, it's not. I don't think it's close. I think it's the football pretty far. And yeah. All right. So Wisconsin and Oregon on Saturday night. All right. We are back, ready to get into our Week 12 picks. We didn't make picks last week, but the week before last we did, and I was a game back in those. I went 4-3. Jesse went 3-4, which means we are tied. We are tied. So let's jump into this. A number of good games this week, though I think there's only two that feature ranked versus ranked. But we'll start with Tulane taking on Navy. The Green Wave are seventh, or I should say number 25 of the country, and they're a 7-point favorite on the road. They all are among the group of 5 teams trying to find a way to the playoff.
This might be the biggest storyline left in the season is which one of us can emerge victorious here in covering the spread here for our picks. So,
oh, that's horrible.
Wire. Yeah, well, that's where we're at. Both these teams have 2 losses. Not long ago, Navy was unbeaten, and I know that they got hammered by Notre Dame and then lost the next week. I think I'm going to go Navy at least to cover. I don't know if they're going to win. Sometimes I just think dealing with the triple option can be problematic, and so I'll go Navy here.
Yeah, I think I will go Navy as well. Again, Tulane still has an opportunity. Certainly something's going to have to happen with Boise State. But, I mean, Tulane has an opportunity. I think they're on the outside, certainly on the outside looking in, but they're not totally out of it. But I'm going to take Navy as well. Looking at the next game, the Kansas Jayhawks, who have been snake bitten. Some of these tight games that they have not been able to finish. They've been in it. Feels like they've been in every game, but have not been able to pull them out at the same level as they have in the past. That's why their record is what it is. But they're going to unbeaten and 6th-ranked BYU. The Cougars, 2.5-point favorites there. They should have lost last week. Just before we jump into this, they should have lost last week. It turned out to be a solid holding call, but that game felt over. They were playing Utah. The game felt over about 3 different times, and then BYU found a way to win. It just feels like they should have lost that game. But congrats to them. They're 9-0.
Kansas has a surprisingly bad record this year at 3-6, but they just beat number 17 Iowa State. So they have it in them. But I don't see the Jayhawks going on the road to Provo and winning that game. I think BYU is going to end up covering. KU is just not a good enough team this year.
Again, they have been in. You go back. I mean, have you looked at the schedule at all?
I looked at it, but I don't know. I'm just going to go with you are what your record says you are.
Okay, all right. I look at what Kansas has faced this year, and yes, they are not a good team. They're 3-6, right? But you go and look at some of the wins. Almost all of them have been by single digits. They have lost by more than 6 once this year. And that was at TCU. It was 38-27. Their other losses at Illinois was 6. UNLV was 3. West Virginia 4. Arizona State 4. And then at Kansas State by 2. Could
Are you
they
talking yourself into Kansas here?
I feel like I'm trying to, but it's a night game out in Salt Lake City. By the way, one of the prettiest backdrops you're ever going to see in college football. that press box view, I think is actually the best view I've had when the Badgers went out there in 2017. The mountains just right over it's great. But no, I'm going to take BYU. So Nebraska on the road at USC. The Trojans are 9-point favorites here, which is a little surprising. But go ahead. What do you got?
Tougher call here than expected because, like, USC is not good and the wheels have fallen off for Nebraska here. But I'm going to go Nebraska, despite what people want to say about time zones and all that stuff. Look, I don't even have to pick the Cornhuskers to win. I just think 9 feels like a lot for a USC team that has fallen apart here since beating Wisconsin.
So they are going to be, they're going, Miller Moss got benched.
Yes.
So they are going with Jordan Maeva. And he obviously last year played at UNLV. He was at UNLV last year. He's barely played this year, but he's going to get the start. He was solid for UNLV last year. I think they're trying to, maybe give them a little bit of kick in the butt. Miller Moss, a few too many interceptions. Potential. I mean, people are starting to look at guys who potentially be in the transfer portal. I would say Miller Moss would be one of those guys potentially could be in the transfer portal just based on getting benched, right? Like you get benched. It's always like, really? And who knows what happens with Lincoln Riley at the end of the year too. I think that obviously plays a role here. I'm going to go, I feel like it's going to be a Nebraska home game because they travel so well. I'm going to go USC though.
Fading my picks here, man, to try to get the lead.
You went Nebraska?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go USC.
Okay.
Missouri, ranked number 23 in the country, going on the road at number 21, South Carolina. The Gamecocks are 13.5-point favorites.
Feels like a big number for 2 top 25 teams, so I'm going with Missouri.
I will go with Missouri as well. Tennessee at number 12, Georgia. Essentially an elimination game here when it comes to the college football playoff. Georgia has 2 losses. Tennessee has 2 losses. Georgia's a 10-point favorite.
The big storyline here is Tennessee's quarterback situation, and I think he's in the concussion protocol. So obviously this is such a big game that you want to do everything to get him in there, but because that's a question mark and because it's at home for Georgia, I think the Bulldogs are going to cover.
Same. I'm going to go I'm going to sign off on that as well because they don't have any leeway here, right? Like, I mean, maybe a 3-loss or Georgia team gets in, but I doubt it. Unless there's some people that fall off the planet here, it just feels like that's going to be a tough thing to do. Ohio State. And the only reason I threw this one in here, I'm going to go Georgia as well. Ohio State. Only reason I threw this one in here is because it's just such a huge number. I mean, you just never know. But Ohio State traveling to Chicago, they're going to play this game at Wrigley Field. They're taking on Northwestern. Ohio State's a 28.5-point favorite.
It's such a huge number that it makes it hard to pick, which is exactly what Vegas wants. I'm going to just say that Ohio State beats the living crap out of Northwestern and covers.
Same. Oregon, ranked number 1 in the country. The number 1 seed if the college football playoff were to start today at Wisconsin. The Ducks, 14-point favorites. Who you got?
This number is not big enough for me to give me pause. I think Oregon is going to roll. I have said all year that I refuse to pick Wisconsin in a big game until the Badgers show me that they can win. But I think I'm at a point where I refuse to pick them even to cover. So I think Oregon's going to roll up in here and walk out with a big win.
So remember the Penn State game? I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go back on what I said earlier in the year that I'm not going to believe in them until they beat somebody good. And then I went ahead and believed in them, and they threw that game away. Do you remember when it was 10-7? You were saying the game was over.
I thought Wisconsin was going to win.
You said the game was over.
Lined up. It was all there. It was everything we thought it was going to be going into the game. It's just I don't feel that way coming into this one, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that they've played bad football the last time we saw them.
Yeah. But for folks that were wondering why Braden Locke threw that interception,
it's my fault.
Jesse Temple.
Yeah. I
said
thought
the game was over.
Ether. I thought it. I didn't say the game was over. I said
you did. You said, "Oh my God, they're going to win this game." I can't believe they're going to win this game.
That's not the same as the game is over. But yes,
I can't believe they're going to win this game. What does that mean?
Well, if
I
I
don't.
had,
We don't need to do the lore. I'm not gonna. I don't need to cross-examine you. It's fine. I'm not gonna do that. Um, but yes, Braden Locke threw that interception because of Jesse Temple. So I said, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna take Wisconsin in that game. That was a mistake. Not gonna make that mistake again. I am back onto my prove me until you prove it. Not a chance. I'm going Oregon as well. So we'll see. What do you think that score is going to look like?
haven't made my pick yet, but I'm just going to say 31-14, which I feel like is a pretty similar score to what I picked in the Alabama game, and Alabama won by even more than that.
I mean, you just look at what Oregon has done points wise.
Yeah.
Somehow they've only scored more than 40 once this year, but they've also only scored less than 30 once. Very consistent.
Yes.
Very
And
consistent.
if Wisconsin were to lose by 17, that's kind of a victory based on how Oregon's done since beating Ohio State. They've won every game by at least 21 points.
Yeah. I don't know that they played overly well against Maryland, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's Dylan Gabriel only threw for 183 yards. Didn't really need to do anything else, but it's not like I don't know that they played fantastic offensively against Maryland last week. So maybe they were looking ahead to Wisconsin. No, probably not. Either way, we'll be back on Sunday to break it all down as Wisconsin then gets ready to head out to Nebraska. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is. Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.